My DINK husband and I had both retired. Just as we were planning a world tour together, he suddenly laid down his cards. I've publicly claimed to be DINK for 30 years for you, but now it's time to bring my 2 children, who've been living elsewhere, home. I had expected this, though, and smiled meaningfully. He thought I was crazy and continued, it's natural for a man to carry on his lineage. If you couldn't have children, I could play along with the DINK pretense. But now, I need to give my children an explanation. He proposed divorce, wanting to take his son and daughter, along with their mother, on a family trip. I immediately agreed, graciously stepping aside and leaving. After news of the divorce spread, everyone felt sorry for me. An elderly neighbor, empathizing, said, at this age, to be abandoned by her husband of bleak old age, how tragic. Charles Reynolds, the old scoundrel, what a jerk. Back then, he swore they'd never have kids, just live a life for 2. Now look, his own son and daughter are old enough to give him grandkids. A young college student from the same complex fumed on my behalf. Chatting with old friends, they couldn't help but lament, you were so brilliant in your youth, successful in your career, living so freely, but you had to be DINK, and now you're old and lonely. My parents also tried to persuade me, as long as you don't divorce, his children are your children. They'll still care for you in your old age. When we're gone, you'll have peace of mind. They all thought I was forced into divorce, that I was heartbroken, that I was facing a lonely old age, having lived my life as a joke. I didn't explain, nor did I bother to refute them one by one. How our situation truly played out, they would eventually learn when the time was right. Charles, on the other hand, was basking in his glory. He posted a family photo on social media with the caption, from today on, I finally have a real family. In the photo, he stood in the middle, with a young man and woman flanking him, their faces beaming with undisguised favor, and the woman who could carry on his lineage held his arm, smiling sweetly and demurely. The family of 4 looked happy and warm. This was probably the domestic bliss Charles had always yearned for. It was as if the years he spent with me had never existed, as if they had always been a small family unit. Look at that, now that's a life winner, someone commented. Yes, Charles had one big. In his youth, he enjoyed a life for 2 with me, living freely for decades, never enduring the hardship of late-night feedings or diaper changes. Yet in his old age, he now had a son and a daughter, who dote on him. How could he not be considered a life winner? Now that he was finally retired, his career and reputation wouldn't be affected. He could at last legitimize the woman he kept hidden for decades, welcome his children home, and experience the warmth of family. And I, at my age, abandoned by my husband, left to face a lonely and unsupported fate, would inevitably draw sighs of pity. But they didn't know that I had been prepared all along. This marriage was never a one-sided act. The divorce proceedings went quickly, almost too quickly for me to fully grasp. Charles personally drove me to the registry office, and signing the papers, his hand didn't tremble at all. Instead, it seemed as if a burden had finally been lifted, making his movements quick and decisive. He smiled at the clerk and said, can't be helped. We're both old now, and the love just died. But thankfully, I have a son and a daughter to keep me company, so I'll still enjoy some family happiness. The clerk looked at me apologetically, her eyes full of sympathy and comfort. I smiled back but didn't say anything. After the divorce, he waved his hand, hiring people to clear out the bedroom I'd lived in for over 30 years. He was impatient to bring Elaine and his 2 children home. I didn't fight or argue, didn't even bother to hire a lawyer. I simply took my half of the savings and a few important personal items, and decisively moved out. On the day Elaine moved in, I returned to pack up the last few things. The front door opened, and I immediately saw brand new photos displayed in the living room. My wedding photo with Charles had been replaced. In its place was a family portrait of the 4 of them. Charles sat in the middle, Elaine linked arms with him, and 2 young, similar-looking adults stood on either side, appearing to be in their 20s, full of youthful spirit. When they saw me enter, the lively atmosphere instantly chilled, as if to declare their unwelcome. Elaine, however, smiled and called out, oh, Anya, did you forget something? Let me help you find it. She completely took on the air of a hostess greeting a guest. Just a few last things. I'm taking them all today, I said calmly. Charles sat on the sofa, head still down, casually flipping through a newspaper, as if waiting for me to take the hint and leave. Sarah and Tom stood to the side, their eyes filled with undisguised distance and wariness, treating me like a strange intruder. Mom, this house's decor looks a bit old, doesn't it? The living room is a bit dark. Why don't we redecorate and change the style? Sarah said casually. Yeah, the sofa needs replacing too. It's so dated. How did Dad manage to live in a place like this? Tom chimed in. I listened to them nitpicking, watching Charles remain silent, and felt a slight urge to laugh. This was the home Charles and I had lived in for 30 years. Every piece of furniture had been meticulously chosen, yet now they were deemed worthless. Elaine intimately linked arms with Charles. See how opinionated the children are? This house needs a complete overhaul. We can't shortchange ourselves. Charles finally slowly raised his head and glanced at me. Anya, are your things packed? Take everything at once. No need to keep coming back for this and that. It saves everyone the awkwardness. His meaning was clear. Once I left this time, don't come back. Don't be an eyesore to their family of 4. I averted my gaze, picked up the bag I just packed, and stood at the doorway, taking one last look at this house that had once been mine. Elaine was delicately leaning on Charles, peeling the orange. Her 2 children sat side by side on the sofa, watching TV. The 3 of them laughed and chatted occasionally. It was as if this home had always been this way, made up of their family of 4, with no place for me. Charles's gaze towards Elaine held the respect for the mother of his 2 children, the guilt for keeping her hidden all these years. As for me, I was merely an old woman they both found irritating, without children or grandchildren to support me, destined to fend for myself. A cold laugh echoed in my heart. Fine. Since you want to drive me away, I'll leave decisively, so you can fully enjoy this fleeting charade. Because in a few days, it will be you all hating and fighting each other. I turned and left the house without looking back. After the divorce, I moved into an apartment, not far from my old home, but now 2 different worlds. I didn't feel any particular difficulty adjusting. Without Charles at home, I found a sense of peace. But outsiders didn't see it that way. No matter how capable and free-spirited you were in your youth, you still lost in the end. This was the common opinion among my friends and relatives. My mother, seeing me, couldn't help but wipe away tears. Anya, you're living alone now, no one to take care of you. What if you fall ill someday? Before, when you said DINK, you meant DINK. You insisted on it. Now what? How wonderful it would be to have a child. At least you wouldn't have ended up like this. My father sighed, his face full of regret. We really shouldn't have let you have your way way back then. If we had tried harder to persuade you, you wouldn't be living like this now. All their words implicitly blamed my insistence on being DINK for losing my husband's heart. The most ridiculous part was my friends, who also felt Charles had done nothing wrong. Men, you know, they need children. Charles was willing to play along with you for so many years. That's already more than enough. You were too stubborn back then. All these years, I've never understood what you were aiming for. Exactly. If you ask me, since you're both old now, Elaine would still call you older sister. Why not just try to make it work, all living together? I thought they would at most advise me to accept Charles's children, but I never expected them to even suggest I share a husband with Elaine. But they didn't consider that those 2 children had no blood relation to me. Even if I had stayed, how many good days could I have truly had? When I first insisted on being DINK, I faced pressure from everyone, declaring my absolute decision not to have children, and was criticized as selfish and unfilial. Charles's parents pressured him to divorce me, but he claimed he didn't mind and just wanted to live a good life with me. Moved by this, I became even more resolute in my decision. For decades, I compromised, taking all the blame myself, preserving his reputation, and even his own masculine confidence and dignity, only to discover that he had brought me nothing but utter deception. He didn't pressure me to have children for him because I wasn't his only woman. If I didn't have kids, he could just have other women do it, and he could still maintain a reputation for loving and protecting his wife, and even gain my parents' trust and support. Why wouldn't he? When I discovered the truth, I never imagined that the husband I'd always thought was gentle and refined could be so deeply manipulated. I was wrong, but my mistake wasn't in not having children. It was in taking it upon myself to preserve his masculine dignity. For this, I was even willing to give up my right to be a mother. Therefore, I fought it for years, just waiting for the moment he could no longer keep up the act, to strike him a heavy blow.
The day I finally decided to make my move arrived 3 weeks later. By then, Charles was happier than ever. He and Elaine had started posting photos almost daily. Family dinners, family outings, family game nights, Tom calling him dad, Sarah hugging his arm. The comments were full of envy. You want it life. This is what happiness looks like. 30 years of sacrifice finally rewarded. Charles practically glowed every time he read them. What nobody knew was that every smiling photo they posted was helping me. Because the more public they became, the harder the fall would be. I sat in my apartment one evening and opened a thick file folder. Inside were documents spanning nearly 10 years. Copies, receipts, contracts, transfer records, DNA reports, photos, letters. Every piece collected patiently, carefully, methodically, the result of years of preparation. I ran my fingers across the folder and smiled. Charles thought he was the only one capable of keeping secrets. The truth was that I had discovered everything 8 years ago. Not just Elaine, not just the children. Everything, including the secret Charles himself didn't know. The very thing that would destroy him. My phone rang. It was my lawyer, Mrs. Reynolds. Everything ready? Yes. And the media? They've received the documents. What about the board members? Already informed. I smiled. Good. Then let's begin. The next morning, Charles woke to chaos. The first call came from Tom. Dad. Tom sounded panicked. Something happened. Charles reportedly laughed. What could possibly be so urgent this early? Dad, look online. The laughter stopped. Minutes later, a statement appeared across multiple financial news outlets. Not gossip sites. Not tabloids. Financial media. Corporate media. Professional investigative outlets. The headline was simple. Former Reynolds Group executive accused of multi-decade asset concealment scheme. Charles nearly dropped his copy. The article detailed how, during his marriage, significant assets had been hidden through third-party accounts and shell companies, properties, investments, stocks, trust funds, millions of dollars, all concealed from his legal spouse, all documented, all verified, and attached to the article, receipts, real receipts. The evidence was overwhelming. By noon, every phone in that house was ringing nonstop. Tom was furious. Sarah was crying. Elaine looked ready to faint. And Charles couldn't understand. Because he knew the hidden assets existed. But he had never imagined anyone could prove it. Especially not me. He called immediately. I answered on the second ring. For several seconds, he said nothing. Then finally, Anya. His voice was shaking. Was this you? I looked out the window calmly. What do you think? You've lost your mind. No. I spent years finding it. His breathing became heavier. You want money? I laughed. Actually laughed. After 30 years, it was the first genuinely amused laugh he had ever heard from me. Money? Charles, you still don't understand. A chill entered his voice. What do you mean? I leaned back. The money was only the opening act. Silence. Then I heard it. For the first time since our divorce. Fear. Real fear. Because Charles suddenly realized something. If I had managed to uncover hidden assets worth millions, then maybe, just maybe, I had uncovered other secrets too. Anya. His voice was lower now. What exactly are you planning? I smiled. The same smile I had worn the day he introduced me to his precious family. The same smile that had made him think I was taking the divorce too well. The same smile that had hidden 8 years of preparation. Don't worry, I said softly. You'll find out soon enough. Then I hung up. Across town, Charles stared at his phone. For the first time in decades, he felt completely out of control. And for the first time in decades, I was the one holding all the cards. The truly devastating blow hadn't even landed yet, because the evidence hidden in the second folder on my desk would not just cost Charles his money, it would cost him his children, his family, his reputation, and the very legacy he had sacrificed everything to protect. 3 days later, the second blow landed, and unlike the first one, this one couldn't be solved with lawyers. It couldn't be settled with money. It couldn't be buried. I personally delivered it. Charles was hosting a celebration dinner. A ridiculous thing to do considering the financial scandal still raging around him. But he was desperate. Desperate to reassure Elaine. Desperate to reassure Tom and Sarah. Most of all, desperate to reassure himself. The four of them sat around the dining table pretending everything was normal. Pretending they were still a happy family. Then the doorbell rang. Elaine opened the door. When she saw me standing there, her smile vanished. Why are you here? I glanced past her. I came to give Charles something. Charles stood up immediately. His face darkened. Anya, what game are you playing now? I handed him a large envelope. I've waited years to give you this. Something in my voice made everyone fall silent. Charles slowly opened the envelope. The moment he saw the first page, all color drained from his face. His hands began shaking. Violently. Tom frowned. Dad, Sarah looked confused. What's wrong? Charles wasn't listening. His eyes were fixed on the report. A DNA report. Several DNA reports. His lips moved soundlessly. No, no, no. I finally stepped inside. For the first time since the divorce. And then I delivered the sentence I had spent 8 years preparing. Charles. The reason I never had children wasn't because I couldn't. The room froze. His head snapped up. I continued calmly. The fertility tests from 32 years ago were wrong. Elaine's eyes widened. Tom and Sarah exchanged looks. Charles stared at me like he was seeing a ghost. You lied. No. You never let me finish reading the results. I pulled another document from my purse. The original medical records. The records he had never bothered to look at. Because he had only cared about one line. One assumption. One excuse. You were the infertile one. Silence. Absolute silence. The words seemed to suck all the oxygen from the room. Elaine actually staggered backward. Sarah looked at Charles. Then at me. Then back again. What is she talking about? Charles's face had become paper white. I smiled coldly. For 30 years, he let everyone believe I couldn't have children. My gaze settled on him. His parents blamed me. My parents blamed me. Society blamed me. And he never corrected anyone. The documents slipped from his trembling fingers. Tom picked them up. He began reading. The more he read, the paler he became. Then he reached the DNA results. His face changed completely. Dad. Charles closed his eyes. As though he already knew what was coming. Tom's voice cracked. Dad, why does this report say we're not biologically related? The room exploded. Sarah grabbed the papers. Elaine lunged for them. Charles tried to stop them. Too late. Much too late. Within seconds Sarah was reading too. Then her face turned ashen. No. No, this is fake. It has to be fake. I folded my hands calmly. It was verified by 3 independent laboratories. Elaine looked ready to collapse. Charles looked even worse. Because the truth was finally exposed. The truth I had uncovered 8 years ago. The truth that had shocked even me. Tom wasn't Charles's son. Sarah wasn't Charles's daughter. Not one drop of Reynolds' blood existed in either of them. The precious lineage he had sacrificed 30 years of marriage for didn't belong to him. Tom backed away from Elaine. What is this? What did she mean? Sarah's eyes filled with tears. Mom? Elaine burst into sobs. Real sobs. The ugly kind. And that reaction told them everything. Tom looked like he'd been punched. Sarah began shaking uncontrollably. Meanwhile, Charles simply sat down. Slowly. Like an old man who had suddenly aged 20 years. I watched him quietly. For decades, he had believed himself clever. He had maintained 2 families, 2 lives, 2 realities. He had deceived everyone, including me. But most importantly, he had been deceived too. 8 years ago, when I hired investigators to trace his hidden assets, they uncovered far more than financial records. They uncovered hospital records, old correspondence, former lovers, dates, timelines, everything. The conclusion had been undeniable. Elaine had known, for years. Maybe from the beginning, maybe not, but she knew. She knew those children weren't Charles's. And she had allowed him to spend decades funding their lives. Paying for schools, paying for homes, paying for opportunities, paying for the future of children who weren't his, while he proudly dreamed about his legacy, his bloodline, his grandchildren, his name continuing forever. The irony was almost poetic. Tom finally turned toward Charles. His eyes were full of rage. Did you know? Charles looked shattered. No. One word. One honest word. And somehow it made everything even worse. Because everyone could hear it. The devastation. The humiliation. The realization that the entire foundation of his happiness had been a lie. I stood. My work was done. As I reached the door, Charles suddenly spoke. His voice sounded broken. Anya. I stopped. For several moments, he couldn't continue. Then finally, you knew for 8 years? Yes. And you waited? I looked back. The man who had once been so proud now looked utterly destroyed. And for the first time in decades, I told him exactly what I thought. You let me carry your shame for 30 years. You watched people blame me. You watched me lose the chance to be a mother because protecting your pride was more important than the truth. I met his eyes. So yes, I waited. His shoulders collapsed. Completely. And as I walked out the door, I heard shouting erupt behind me. Tom screaming. Sarah crying. Elaine begging. Charles saying nothing at all. Because there was nothing left to say. The family he had chosen over me had begun tearing itself apart. And this time, there was no one left for him to blame but himself. Epilogue. Charles Reynolds. The house was silent. Not peaceful. Not calmed. Silent in the way abandoned places were silent. The kind of silence that made a man hear every mistake he had ever made. Charles sat alone in the living room. The same living room where he had once imagined grandchildren running around. The same living room where he had proudly installed that family portrait after forcing Anya out. The portrait was gone now. The frame lay shattered in the trash. Just like everything else. Tom hadn't spoken to him in 6 months. Sarah had blocked his number. Neither of them wanted anything to do with the scandal. Not because they hated him, because they couldn't bear looking at him. He reminded them of the lie that had defined all their lives. As for Elaine, Elaine had left first. The moment the financial investigations deepened. The moment the lawsuits began. The moment the money started disappearing. 30 years together. Gone in 30 days. The woman he had destroyed his marriage for hadn't even stayed long enough to watch the collapse. Sometimes Charles wondered which humiliation hurt more. Discovering the children weren't his, or discovering Elaine never truly loved him either. The legal battles lasted nearly 2 years. Anya never showed him mercy. Not once. Not for a single second. Every hidden account. Every concealed investment. Every undeclared property. Every fraudulent transfer. She found them all. Because she had spent years preparing. Years. While he was busy congratulating himself on how clever he was. The settlement alone was devastating. The penalties were worse. The public humiliation was worst of all. Charles Reynolds had once been respected, successful, admired, a man people described as loyal and dependable. Now, his name had become a cautionary tale, a punchline, a warning. Every article about him used the same words: deception, fraud, double life, mistress, secret family, financial misconduct. His grandchildren, children he had once proudly claimed as proof of his legacy, weren't even related to him. People laughed. They genuinely laughed. The irony was too delicious. The man obsessed with bloodlines had spent decades building somebody else's. The worst day came unexpectedly. A former colleague approached him at a cafe. The man looked uncomfortable, embarrassed. Charles forced a smile. "Good to see you." The colleague hesitated, then said quietly, "I ran into Anya last week." Something twisted in Charles's chest. Even now, even after everything, hearing her name still hurt. "How is she?" The colleague smiled. A real smile. "Happy." One word. Happy. Not bitter. Not lonely. Not miserable. Happy. The word haunted him for weeks, because he remembered what everyone had predicted after the divorce. For Anya, abandoned, childless, alone, ruined. Yet somehow she had emerged stronger than ever. Meanwhile, he had gotten exactly what he claimed he wanted: a family, children, a legacy. And every single piece of it had turned to dust. 3 years after the divorce, Charles saw her again. By accident. He was leaving a pharmacy. She was crossing the street. For a moment, he didn't recognize her. Anya looked younger. Not physically. Something else. Lighter. As if decades of weight had finally been removed from her shoulders. She was laughing. Actually laughing. Beside her walked a young woman and a little boy. The child couldn't have been older than 6. The young woman held Anya's arm affectionately. The little boy called out, "Grandma, wait for me." Charles froze. Grandma? The word struck harder than any court judgment ever had. Harder than the DNA reports. Harder than the divorce. Harder than the public disgrace. He stood there watching. The young woman wasn't related to Anya by birth. That much was obvious. But it didn't matter. The child adored her. The woman adored her. They were family. Not because of DNA. Not because of lineage. Because of love. Charles suddenly remembered something Anya had once said decades ago. Back when they were young. Back when she still trusted him. Family isn't something you own. It's something you earn. At the time, he had barely listened. Now the words felt like a knife. Because he finally understood. Too late. Far too late. That night, Charles returned to his empty house. The house he had fought so hard to preserve. The house that now echoed with nothing but regret. He sat alone in the darkness. No wife. No children. No grandchildren. No friends. No reputation. No legacy. Nothing. Only memories. And among all those memories, one image tortured him most. Not Elaine. Not Tom. Not Sarah. Anya. Young. Brilliant. Laughing beside him decades ago. Looking at him as if he were the best man in the world. A woman who had loved him completely. A woman who would have spent her entire life at his side. A woman he had betrayed for a fantasy. And the cruelest part? He finally understood that Anya's greatest revenge had never been the lawsuits. Never the DNA reports. Never the public humiliation. Those things merely destroyed his life. Her true revenge was far simpler. She moved on. She built a beautiful life without him. And every morning Charles Reynolds woke up knowing he had traded the only person who had ever genuinely loved him for absolutely nothing. The realization stayed with him until the day he died. Alone. Exactly as he had once planned for her.